A Woman's Response to The Rational Male by Rollo Tomassi. Today we're going to be discussing the Iron Rules of Tomassi. There are 9 of them, and rather than try to cover all of them, I'm just going to pick out a few and try to cover those in a little bit more depth. So right away, let's get started with rule number 1. When I read this, it seemed like really it seems like one of those things that should be obvious. And it should be obvious, but it's also not remotely obvious. Women these days, they're taught from the time that they're wee little girls to be a leader. We want to make women to be leaders, And so when I was young, even, you want to be a leader. Lots of talk about leadership, lots of talk about STEM too. We want to mold young girls into, essentially men and have them play all the roles that men have ever played. And we don't necessarily want to do it ourselves, but we want to have somebody who's female, like who has a vagina doing all this stuff so that we can, feel good about ourselves. I really think sometimes that's what it all boils down to. I want to feel good about having a vagina, so I want someone else with a vagina to go and do all the stuff that I myself am either unwilling or incapable of doing. If you're entering into a relationship with a woman, one of the things that is kind of important to remember, you can't necessarily establish power right away. You can't just bear down on her and, say I'm in control. That's a very, getting back to Tomassi's idea of covert versus, overt communication. That's a very overt kind of thing to communicate to a woman. It's not going to work very well for you. You don't want to, bear down on her and say I'm in charge. You want her to come to you and say, you're in charge. And I mean, it's not even just, it's not necessarily something that's supposed to be confused with power. And this is something Tomassi talks about in this chapter, in this section. It's not man has the power over the woman. It's man controls the story. And, that's important. I always thought of it as kind of leadership, and maybe I'm misinterpreting it because it's a kind of a delicate thing. It's a nuanced kind of definition. But I looked at it and it was like, I trust my husband to be the leader. I discarded many men. I passed them up after, shortly after meeting them. I'd meet them and immediately just kind of looked into the next one. And the reason that I did this is I did not trust them to lead me to the ends of the earth and back. And my husband is a man that I would trust to lead me to the ends of the earth and back. We were actually talking about moving into a new house because this is our starter home, and maybe one day we'll eventually be able to afford something a little bigger and nicer. We're relatively young, so. But we were talking about it, and I looked at it, and it was like, I would follow you to the ends of the earth and back. Like I just said it. And I've said this to him many times, and I've always meant it. Like if he decides to move off to, the other side of the globe, I will follow him to the other side of the globe. I might not necessarily be particularly happy moving to the other side of the globe. I really like it here where we live, but if that's what he says, we need to do, I'll be like, oh, okay, here we go. Let me pack my stuff. And that's what I think of when I read this. That's my initial reaction. I don't know if that's exactly what Tomassi is touching on, but that's not something that you can. I mean, I suppose you can dominate a woman and you can make her, afraid of you and fearful and submissive enough that she'll just kind of cow to you. But what kind of a relationship do you really have with her at that point? What you really want is a woman who comes to you and respects your leadership and your alphaness enough that she would be willing to follow you when you say something like that. That, she follows you. She lives inside your framework. You say, you point to a hill and say, okay, we're going to go up that hill. And she says, okay, we're going to go up that hill. You don't necessarily want her pointing to the hill and say, we're going to go up that hill, because honestly, that's not going to be what she wants. And really, it's not going to be what you want. Speaking of, We don't want to be in control of the frame. We really don't want that. I think I think the vast majority of women do not necessarily want to be the one in charge. We're taught that we should be the one in charge. We're taught that we should want to be the one in charge. We're taught to act like we should want to be the one in charge. I don't think there are many women who actually want to be the one in charge in a relationship. We get that big ego boost from saying, "Oh yeah, I want to be a man." But honestly, if we ever met a man who could control the frame or could have that kind of authority, and I'm not talking about domineering authority. I'm talking about just somebody that we naturally turn to as someone that we would trust for leadership. All of a sudden, that whole "oh, I'm a strong, independent woman, hear me roar, I can do anything you can do," all that starts to dissolve pretty quickly. It's like, okay, you're a bigger badass than me, and I trust you. And I want you to be the leader here. I want you to be the one in charge. And again, I'm not entirely sure if leadership exactly is what Tomassi is touching on when he's talking about frame control. But it does seem to me like that is what he's talking about. This tendency that men have to quickly give women the control and the power. Like, you see it in marriages a lot where the man is like, "Oh, my wife lets me do this, my wife lets me do that." It's like, my husband does whatever he wants. He doesn't come to me and hold a little committee meeting like, "Is it okay if I can go do this?" He goes and does what he wants. And I trust him with that. Like, he'll come to me and he'll be like, "Hey, I bought this." And it's like, "Okay, what did you buy and what does it do?" And I trust him to have made a very sound and rational and reasonable decision with it. And it's like, he had a bonus one time. He got a bonus at work and he bought a TV. And he's like, "I bought this because I worked very hard for this and I finally got this bonus and this is what I want to do with the money." And I was like, "Okay, we didn't have a TV, so, great, now we've got a TV." It's difficult for me to really look at the control that men automatically give to women and understand it. Like, I just don't see it as a good idea. And this is something that I think too many women expect and too many men too readily give to them. And, we automatically lose respect for you. It's like, okay, this guy's a pushover. If I can push him around, anybody can push him around. So, really, do I want this in a mate? I enjoy having him around as an errand boy, but, when it comes to sexual attraction, when it comes to long-term, pair bonding, who am I going to stay with? Who am I going to stick like glue to? Is it a man who looks at the world and says, "We're going to go do this"? Or is it a man who says, "Well, honey, if you want to, we can go do this"? It's not exactly debatable. And, there are women out there who are talking about how they want to be in charge, they want power, and they scoff at the idea that they want a man who's in control. And then they go home and they read 50 Shades of Grey at night, and it's like, where's the disconnect going on here? Like, don't you see the disconnect? Because it's pretty blatantly obvious to us. You would totally go nuts over a guy who was in control of himself and in control of his life. But there are so many women in this world who do not see that. And I think part of it is just because that's the blue pill for women. Women are taught not to submit to men because, "I am lion, hear me roar." That's what we want. We really, really want that. We really do. And again, we don't necessarily want, we don't want a man to come in and overpower us and take control from us. We don't want one of those abusive asshole boyfriends who's drunk all the time, who beats us if we question him. And, we don't want to be cowering in fear that he's going to slap us in the face. Although, come to think of it, maybe that's the reason so many women go back to that guy again and again. "I hate him so much. He's so mean to me. He gave me a black eye." I just can't leave him and I don't know why. It's like, well, maybe it's not so much his alphaness as the fact that he's got the worst possible frame control that he could have, and they're mistaking his abusive nature for a guy who actually controls the frame and actually is in control of himself. That abusive alcoholic guy isn't in control of himself at all, but he can appear to be in control of the frame, and that's what they're secretly looking for. If that makes any sense at all. Moving on. This is not the case with me and my husband, and I'm very happy that it's not the case with me and my husband. I think that our relationship is healthier because it's not the case with me and my husband. Even my parents, and my parents have a tendency to be very egalitarian in their understanding of the world. Oh, we have to be equals, and we have to each be, regard each other with respect in the marriage, which you do have to regard your partner with respect in the marriage, but I don't think they necessarily take the time to step back and realize how very much my mother looks up to my father, and my father is the authority in the house. Like my mom, she runs around and she runs things like on a day-to-day basis. When I was growing up, mom was the one who, you need to go to school, you need to do this, she'd be ushering us back and forth, you need to brush your teeth. Basically what I'm doing with my kids now, but if dad said something, what dad said was what goes. It's like, okay, your father says we're going to do this, so we're going to do this. It was like, mom was the authority around the house with us kids. And then when dad came in and said something, all of a sudden it's like, okay, that's where we're going. That's what we're doing. And my mother had a lot of respect for my father. And I find that same kind of dynamic with me and my husband, where I have a lot of respect for my husband. I'm perfectly capable of operating independently if need be. I think a lot of people have this idea that any housewife who submits to her husband is automatically, this mindless, weak, pathetic little person. And really, not necessarily. I'm perfectly capable of getting through my days on my own and ordering the kids around. You need to get ready for school. You need to grab your backpack. You need to grab your lunch. It's time to eat dinner. All that stuff. I mean, I can do that, and I can do that independently. I don't need to constantly be going back to him like, hey, can I do this? Hey, can I do that? Hey, I don't know what to do for myself because I just can't think on my own. I'm not that kind of person, and I don't think many women are that kind of person. And at the same time, if he comes and he says, okay, we need to do something, all of a sudden it's like, okay, everybody, we're going to do this thing that dad said we're going to do. And that's because he's the leader. That's because early in our relationship, I looked at him and I said, I entered into his frame on my own willingly. I came to him and said, you're the leader. You're the one in charge of these decisions. That's the way I want it, and I think that our relationship is very healthy because of it. He respects me, he enjoys my companionship, he definitely appreciates me, and I definitely feel appreciated for who and what I am and who and what I bring into the relationship. But I know that he's in charge. And so when he says, okay, because of these various factors, we need to go here, I feel very comfortable and very safe following him and very secure following him. And that safety and security is very reassuring and comforting to me. And so, we balance well together. We fit well together. And I think a lot of women, they try to take over and they try to be in the lead position because they've been taught to, they've been told that's how they're supposed to operate. They're, pecking at their husbands, which honestly, I peck at my kids that way. I'm constantly chasing after the kids. You need to go do this. You need to go do that. If you do these chores, you will be rewarded with this. That's how we treat our children. We naturally act that way for a reason, We're supposed to act that way when we're, raising small children. If a woman treats her husband like a small child, you gotta ask how much she really respects him. If you're partner in your long-term relationship treats you like a small child, you have to ask yourself, does she really respect me? And this even goes for my husband to a certain extent. My husband treats me like a coworker sometimes. Every once in a while, he'll come home and, he'll talk to me and he'll be in work mode. And I can tell he's in work mode. It's like he'll talk to me almost as though I would almost say almost as though I'm an employee, and, he's not a bad boss. So if he's telling me what needs to get done and telling me, oh, you need to go do the dishes, this hasn't been done, and I'm noticing that this is starting to slip, we need to get a hold of this, and that's how he says it too. It's like, I'm noticing that the laundry is starting to slip, we need to kind of get back into control of that. If you need help with it, I can do it, but I'm kind of busy with this right now, so let me know. He's in work mode, and I can tell that he's in work mode. It's a very unique way of speaking that he has when he's, in work mode. He doesn't treat me like a child, and he doesn't treat me like an inferior person. He's very brusque, and we need to get this done, and very goal oriented. And he's not disrespectful about it. And I kind of look at some of these relationships that men have with women, and it seems like women are disrespectful about it. Speaking of. I don't know how much you guys would regard me as an intellectualizing woman, but I definitely wanted a man to establish his frame in my life. I definitely, what is it, still craved, secretly craved. I definitely craved that. I definitely would not have wanted a man who did not have a strong sense of his own frame. And, I looked at it, I remember looking at it, and I hadn't read any of this stuff. I was looking at it and thinking, I want a man who, number one, wouldn't be boring. That was my big rule. I don't want a man that I'll become bored with, because I need constant stimulation. And if I'm dating a guy and I get bored with him, it's not going to end well. I'm going to have to, I'll cut off the relationship pretty quickly if I find myself getting bored. So I need a man that I can never become bored with. What would a man who I couldn't be bored with look like? And it's like, well, it's lacking the term frame, lacking the terms that Tomassi writes about in his book. I really wanted a man who had a sense of fire in his spirit. I wanted a man with metal in his soul. A man who had a sense of who he was and what he was doing, and a sense of, well, for lack of a better word, his own frame. I didn't want a man who came to me and gave me the "we're not worthy" treatment and expected me to be attracted to him after that. And I think that a lot of women, no matter how powerful and independent they become, they still want a man who's slightly more powerful and slightly more capable than they are to come in and, and satisfy that hypergamous urge. And, I'm not talking about hypergamy in the sense of monetary assets here. I'm talking about hypergamy in the sense that he's just a little bit smarter, he's just a little bit stronger, he's just a little bit quicker, he's just a little bit more on the ball. He's a little bit faster than I am. He's got his shit together a little bit more. He knows what's going on around him in the world better than I do. And when he says, we're going here, I know that I can follow him, and he's going to take me to a good place. That's what we want. No matter how powerful we get, no matter how in charge we are, we do not want a man who we can just boss around all the time. We don't want somebody that we can treat like a little kid. We've already got small children, a lot of us. By design, we're supposed to have small children. That doesn't mean that we're always going to be capable of having small children, but by design, that's the way we're programmed. You find a mate. You find a mate who's got his shit together, who you can trust to follow up that hill because he knows what he's doing. You find a mate that you are comfortable submitting to. And you trust him to handle the external matters of the world so that you can go into the house or, the cave, if you're going to by our ancient caveman instincts, whatever place that you call the domicile. And you can order the kids around and hustle them from here to here, shuffle them this way, shuffle them that way. I need you to brush your teeth. I need you to come here for supper. It's time to go to school, so I need you to put on your shoes right now. You can do all that stuff. And you can trust him to know the world around you, and you can kind of relax and focus on being a good parent to your children. I think that's why we're so driven in this direction. It's like if he's not in charge of the shit that's going on out there, you can't really focus on the shit that's going on in here. And you need to go, there's a power vacuum. You need to go to him, and you need to start shuffling him around too. Like, I need you to go outside and, hunt down a woolly mammoth. I need you to go do this. I need you to go do that. It's stressful. It's like, okay, I've got to worry about the world inside of the domicile that I'm already stressed out and, busy enough with to begin with. And I have to worry about the world outside of the domicile because I don't necessarily trust this man enough to have his shit together when anything out there goes wrong. And so, it's a big rule. And it's important to realize that you're not necessarily going to be achieving that by dominating a woman. If you might be able to achieve it on the short term, but the artificial will never be a good substitute for the genuine. So you could be that drunken asshole who smacks her if she puts a toe out of line, or maybe smacks her if she's having if you're having a bad day and you're in a bad mood. You can be that guy and she'll come crawling back to you, but it's never going to be as good as a woman who comes to you and says, I respect you. I trust you. I want you to take the lead and tell me where we're going. And I want to go with you. Anyway, that's how I interpret that section. That's how I interpret the idea of frame. And it is, as Tomassi says, vitally important that you as the man be in control of the frame. I just think that that's really what women want. And I think as many women out there as there are who would deny that, I think that the majority of us, the overwhelming majority, like nearly all of us, either genuinely, like overtly want it, or secretly and subconsciously want that. And that's why you never find porn where there's, and by porn I mean romance novels. In fact, I just realized my phone here is sitting on a romance novel that somebody lent me. They told me it was an excellent romance novel. I never finished it because it was so not my kind of book. So now I'm using it as a stand for my phone when I make videos on YouTube. When you look at women's porn, which is a romance novel, our version of pornography, you never hear stories about, well, you really don't see hot, sexy stories about a guy who instantly kowtows to everything a woman wants and lets her tell him what to do. Like, no, it's usually the structure of a romance novel. We all know the structure of a romance novel. It's like, what does she really want? No matter how powerful she becomes, that's going to be what she wants. Anyway, moving on. I find this rule really interesting because it took my husband a month to get into my pants. Granted, he wasn't trying to get into my pants for a month. But, and maybe it's just different because I'm me and I had a unique set of circumstances, but as an exotic dancer, sex was kind of a given with me. Like that was kind of an openly advertised thing. Like, exotic dancer, hey, I look great naked and I'm probably going to be a freaky in bed. Everybody knows it. It's not a secret. The thing that was a secret, the thing that wasn't necessarily immediately apparent, and the thing that I was very much aware of, if I want a guy and I want to keep that guy, I have to prove to him that I have more to offer than sex. The sex we all know about. The sex is definitely there. I've got the sexy going on. Well, not so much anymore. I'm older now, but you get the idea. When I was 23, I had the sexy going on. How do I convince a man that I want to keep, a man that I'm really impressed by, that I really, really like, my husband? How do I convince him that I'm not just another cheap lay? Because a stripper, that's the definition of a cheap lay. Oh, it's some hussy who gets naked for money. What else is she good for? And so, for me, in my situation at least, one of the reasons it took us so long to become romantic with each other is because I was very, very guarded and very, paranoid, for lack of a better word. I was extremely wary of my eventual husband at the time that I met him, because the more I got to know him, the more I realized that this guy was very important to me. And that was how I thought of it. It's like, okay, I really, really, really like this guy. This is the kind of person that I want to have. I was an idiot. I kept thinking, this is the kind of guy I want to have in my life forever. This is the kind of guy I want to be with, be friends with for the rest of my life. I definitely can't let things get romantic with him, because then we'll break up and then he'll go away. And by the way, I should probably mention, that's dread. And that's what I kept getting hung up on earlier. Like, I was always talking about how I didn't understand competition anxiety. The thing I was getting hung up on was the idea of competition. I mean, I got naked on a stage in front of crowds of people. There was absolutely, I have no shame anymore. There is nothing competition-wise that really bothered or fed my insecurities. The thing I was missing out on was the idea of anxiety. So more emphasis on anxiety, less emphasis on competition, suddenly makes a lot more sense, because dread, which is the other term that Tomassi uses for it, which I guess isn't his preferred term for it, but that I understood. Dread I understood very well, and generally dread motivates a woman to have sex with you because she wants to lure you in with, the very alluring nature of her vagina. I, on the other hand, I had all that set out for me. Like, that was all there. We already knew that was there. For me, I had to lure him in with everything else that I had to offer. And so I had to really impress him with everything else. And so when that dread hit and I realized I wanted to keep this man as close to me as possible for the rest of my life, my instant reaction was not, let me get naked and act sexy around this guy. Let me start wearing, revealing clothing around him. It was, I have to make sure that we're really good friends. I have to make sure that we really get close to each other as friends and that we have this really strong friendship together. And I absolutely must not sleep with him, because if I do, and the relationship isn't really fully formed yet, that friendship just isn't really there and isn't really solid. If I do that, he might just have the sex with me, say, okay, that was fun, and then wander off into whatever other interesting adventures he might be having. So it wasn't necessarily a fear of competition. It was a fear that he would just not be that attached to me, because I didn't feel personally like the overwhelming and awesome and magnetic power of my magical vagina was going to be enough to hold his attention. I had to have an intellectual connection with him as well. And if I didn't have that, then he might just wander off. So it's really interesting when Tomassi writes this, because I think that there are a lot of women who very rapidly use sex as a way to glue themselves to a man. I don't think that that's necessarily a healthy reaction, though. A brand new relationship is like, it's like the budding of a young plant. It's a very delicate, tender little thing. It might grow up to be a big, solid old oak tree, but right now it's just this little teeny bud. And you have to be very careful with it. And you have to water it regularly with the right kind of water and give it good nutrition and just baby the damn thing like crazy. that was how I felt about my relationship with my husband. And that was partially because of dread or competition anxiety, which I now understand a lot better. So, to all of you who have written to me and tried to explain it to me, I finally think I got it. So thank you. The explanations helped. But also it doesn't necessarily motivate me so much anymore. I think I still want to keep him happy, but I want to keep him happy because I love him, not necessarily because I'm afraid he'll wander off. And I don't necessarily try to keep him happy with sex. Like, that's not what motivates me sexually. It is what motivated me to be very, very careful with our relationship very early on. I looked at it at the time when we were first getting together and we first started officially dating as, I want to marry this man. So I need to start right now trying to figure out how to be the kind of woman that he's going to want for a wife and be a wife to him. I honestly, in many ways, I think that our first date was the point at which I decided I might as well be married to this man, which is probably sounds a little bit creepy when you say it that way, but I mean, we'd been talking to each other for like a month solid at that point. I knew I wanted to marry him. He had been talking about marrying me, but he was kind of holding back to, he wanted to take a year to date and then a year to be engaged and just kind of get a feel for how our relationship worked. And he was being very smart about it. He was being very, this is what you should do, honestly, guys, because, that time that you spend being engaged is a good time to kind of vet a woman and see what she's really like. And if she turns into a bridezilla, maybe you want to rethink that marriage. But I looked at it at that point, and this was me entering his frame, basically. I wanted to make myself into the kind of woman who would always be a good wife for him. And so from our first date onward, I tried to act as though I was already his wife. Not in a creepy way, but in a way of being very loyal to him, being very respectful to him, not necessarily in a submissive way initially, but making sure that I valued him appropriately as a wife would, and also to let him know that I valued him as a lifelong partner, not necessarily as a wife, because that gives everybody this idea that you're, submissive and not capable of thinking or doing anything for yourself, but to value him as a lifelong partner, as an extremely valuable and important person in my life, and to treat the relationship as being so valuable. And so I do wonder about, women who make you wait for sex. And I know what Tomassi is talking about with, if you're dating her and she keeps on saying, oh, I need to be comfortable. Oh, I'm just not ready yet. I've done that with guys where I'll go on dates with them and they'll try to kiss me. And it's like, I'm just not ready yet. Translation, never. No way. Not going to happen. Do not want to kiss you. And at the same time, there is that care that comes into building a relationship. And I don't know exactly how finely that's drawn. I sometimes wonder if I wonder if he would actually advise a guy if a woman is clearly showing all indications of sexual interest, but she's saying, I really want to wait for marriage for religious reasons or something. I want to make sure that we've, if she wants, I don't know, like, how does that work? I do know that it's probably best to build a very, very strong relationship before you add sex on top of it. If you meet a girl and she sleeps with you right away, how well do you know her? Are the chemicals from all that beautiful, wonderful sex you've been having with her influencing any decisions you make about her? Is your judgment or her judgment being limited or otherwise compromised by those sexual chemicals? Those are important questions to ask. So I'm iffy on this one. Definitely if you notice a girl who's like pushing you away when you have like a raging heart on, just going, oh, I just need to feel comfortable. That would definitely be a red flag right there. That would be a red flag. And there are things that change this. I think that really, really religious women, sometimes it's difficult because there are enough really, really religious women who really, really want to have a husband that they're going to enter into his frame and look up to and all that stuff. It's like, do you want to be having sex or pushing for sex with a woman like that right away when she might be offering everything you're really looking for, but she's also not going to want to have sex right away because it goes very strongly against her beliefs about how a relationship should initially be formed. So I question that one. I'm not saying he's wrong. I feel like there are some details that are just not quite there that need to be fleshed out a little bit. Not necessarily for you guys, but for me, so that I can understand it better. That's one that I always just look at and question a little bit. Like, in order to really seduce an alpha amazing guy, you have to be more than just the magic of your vagina. You have to have more to offer. You have to offer him up something genuinely meaty and substantial in yourself. And I don't think that a guy is necessarily going to be able to pick up on that meaty substantiality in a woman if he sleeps with her right away. That's been my mindset for a very long time. My husband and I totally broke that rule. We absolutely broke that rule. I wanted him to move in with me because he was living with his relatives. He just moved to town, so he didn't have an apartment yet. I had an apartment, and I was like, hey, if you come over here, we can do this sex thing a lot more frequently, and I really want to do that, which is something a lot of women say to a lot of men, but I meant it. I understand what Tomassi's talking about, how, legally if a guy gets into a long-term relationship with a girl that's not necessarily going anywhere definite, suddenly he's responsible for all the financial aspects of the apartment. But if she decides she doesn't want him anymore, the first thing she's going to do is kick him out of the apartment or the house or wherever. And so, I understand. I definitely think it's a good rule. We totally broke that rule. We didn't follow that rule at all. But for the majority of guys, this is actually a really good rule. I hate having those times when I say, hey, do as I say, not as I do. Like, I really hate those rules because anytime somebody says that, it's like, okay, you're being a hypocrite and I don't trust you. This is one of those times, generally speaking, do what he says and don't do what I did, but boy, did we have fun. If you're watching these videos, you probably know why that is. You've probably seen enough bad examples of bad things happening, but let me give you my own personal example of that happening. I dated a guy actually. Good guy, nice guy in a lot of ways. He had some problems, but obviously he wasn't the guy I ended up with, but one of the problems that he had about, I don't know how long after we started dating, about a month after we started dating, he told me, my ex-girlfriend is pregnant with my child. And what happened was he was dating some bitch. She was a bitch, what can I say? And she really liked him, and she wanted him to move with her to California. And he didn't want to move to California. He was happy in our hometown. And I guess by now you kind of figured out I'm not from California. I'm from the boonies, guys. But yeah, she wanted him to move to California with her. And he said no. And a couple months later, she magically got pregnant. And it was, I guess, her birth control magically failed her. And she looked at him and she said, well, now I'm pregnant. So now you have to move to California with me. And she went to California and he said no. And he stayed in our hometown. And it ripped him to pieces that his first child, his only child, was being born in another state to this woman who had lied to him and deceived him. Because, how convenient is that? You're on birth control, you're having sex for however long they were together, and you never have any kind of a slip up, and then suddenly, magically, when it becomes convenient for her, woohoo, the birth control failed. How funny. We all know what happened there. And it ripped him to pieces. I like condoms, personally. I think birth control fucks with a woman's head. And increasingly, we're finding information that suggests that birth control fucks with a woman's head. Condoms are nice. I really am a huge fan of condoms. I haven't used a condom in 9 years, but I do believe in condoms. Once I was married and once my husband and I were kind of like, okay, do we want to have kids? Yes. Okay, so what's the worst that can happen if we throw away the condoms? Well, we're going to have kids a little earlier than we expected. Is that a problem for you? No, it's not a problem for me. Is it a problem for you? No. Okay. I guess now we can kind of do away with the condoms. But honestly, if you aren't in a relationship, basically if you aren't married and having discussed kids and having decided, okay, we want to have kids, or kids are something we want to have, guard your semen like it was a precious treasure and there were thieves all around you trying to steal it. That's just good life advice. Make sure that you have control of the condoms. And I mean, this is another thing where I broke the rules because I have a latex allergy. So whenever I had condoms, like I had to buy my own because I had to buy special brands, and things got complicated. Bring in your own condoms. Make sure that your condoms have not been tampered with in any way. Make sure that they are fresh condoms that are, not past their expiration date. Make sure that the packages have been well cared for and kept in a good, environment at good temperature control, and haven't been worn on or, otherwise disturbed. Guard your condoms, Guard your condoms and make sure that, just don't trust women with their birth control. Just don't, I liked condoms because every time I used them, I knew that birth control was actively being used. It was a physical form of birth control that I could actively see at the time that I was using it, and I was aware of whether or not it worked. I ended up using the morning after pill like a couple times because we had condom failures. And when you have a failure in your condom, your primary method of birth control, you are immediately visually alerted to the failure of your birth control method. You know that it's not working, and you know that you need to do something about it. Plan B, whatever other form of birth control you have, there are actually there are spermicides you can play around with. Make sure your spermicides interact properly with the type of condom you're using, because some spermicides will dissolve your condoms. Research your birth control. Get to know your birth control. Do you like having sex? Having birth control, and good birth control at that, is a wonderful part of having sex. Research it. Get to know it. Make yourself familiar with it. That's good practice if you're going to be having sex. Condoms prevent the spread of STDs. Women that I've talked to in the past frequently, it always drives me up a wall. They act like the birth control pill is the only type of reliable birth control a woman can get. And it's like, give me a break. Number one, if you forget to take your pills, then your birth control is suddenly not remotely reliable. Number two, and women forget shit. Women forget that shit all the time. And number two, condoms are surprisingly reliable if you use them properly every single time. And I'm sorry, when people complain, oh, well, we don't use the condom properly every single time, it's like, you're going to have a baby, because that's what happens if you don't use your condoms properly. You end up procreating. A condom is designed to prevent procreation. It is also very handy at preventing the spread of STDs. I love condoms. Like I said, haven't used one in 9 years, but, back when I actually cared about accidental pregnancy, like at this point, if I got pregnant, I'd be over the moon. I've been trying to get pregnant for almost a year now. It's been very annoying. But if you want to avoid accidental pregnancy, gentlemen, even if she's on birth control, think of that birth control pill that she's taking as a wonderful backup method to make you personally a little bit safer, but still use a condom. Do not trust women. Some of them lie, and you don't know which ones are going to lie to you. And finding out the hard way is not a good way to find out. I am interested in this one. I am curious how men love and how men expect to be loved. Because, like, even in my last video, I was talking about how hypergamy affects my love and how hypergamy is woven into my sense of love for my husband, and how, you have to go so far down into the roots of my human understanding of the emotional feeling that we know is love. At that point, it's kind of like, okay, well, what makes any human being love? And I really do find myself asking that question. What makes any human being experience love? What exactly is it that men want and expect from women and are then disappointed when they do not find it coming from women? I want to know about that. I'm curious. I honestly, that's something that if you guys could leave that in the comments, tell me what it is that men think they're getting from feminine love or want to get from feminine love. And I mean, I understand the just be yourself attitude, but I think the just be yourself attitude is remarkably stupid for both men and women. A 400-pound woman who's like, why can't men love me for the way I am? Is exactly the same as the schlubby guy who's sitting in his mom's basement eating Cheetos and playing video games and saying, why can't women love me for the way I am? It's like, well, take a shower, get in shape, do something with yourself, do anything other than sit in your mom's basement eating Cheetos all the time and getting fat and acting lazy. Bathing. Bathing is a huge thing. Like, I want somebody to love me for me is great, except if I smell so bad that they pass out the moment they get anywhere close to my crotch, they're not going to want to make love to me. Even a really horny guy, if it smells too bad, if it isn't clean, I'm pretty sure even a really horny guy is going to have second thoughts. Granted, I don't think I've ever let it get that bad, but you get the idea. If I'm filthy, if I'm dirty, if I'm disgusting, and if my poor hygiene has visibly affected me, and if I'm fat, and if I just don't look very good, is a guy really, really going to want me for me? But I have such a great personality, guys. How is that not the same thing in some ways? And I think in some ways it isn't the same thing. And I think one of the ways that it isn't the same thing is guys initially have that reaction where they look at the woman, they say, no, and they turn around and they run away. I'm not lowering my standards that far. Like, even if I'm horny, there's still a limit to where I just won't stoop that far. Which is frequently for women physical, because men are visually much more stimulated than women are. Women do this thing, especially with hypergamy being what it is, where they'll get into a relationship with a guy and they'll be with him for, years. They'll be married to him. They'll have kids with him. And they still won't love him. And that's really terrifying. And I understand why a lot of men look at it and say we shouldn't be with women, because it's not worth it to take that risk. But I don't think that happens with all women, because obviously I'm very much in love with my husband. I don't know what percentage of women it does happen with. And I don't know if that's necessarily what Tomassi is talking about here. Even if a woman loves a man, as much as a woman is capable of loving a man in the way that a woman is designed to love a man, that man is still not going to get the same kind of love from a woman that he expects to get from a woman. And that makes me wonder what kind of love he expects. I'm very curious about that. So yeah, leave me a comment and let me know about that. So there's one other thing I want to discuss. Let me get that, because I knew I wouldn't remember this. I will not remember this if I don't have it written down. I've been thinking lately, and I was thinking that I would like to do something I've never done before. My viewership has, I believe, doubled since I started doing this review of Rollo Tomassi's book. There are a lot of new faces out there. Not that I'm seeing your faces, but there's a lot of new people who are watching these videos. And so I thought it would be really cool to take a poll on what you guys want to see me talk about next. And so I've got 3 different options that I picked out that I think would be fun for me to make a video about, that I'm actually very eager to make a video about. I'm open to suggestions, so if you have something that you really want me to make a series of videos talking about or reviewing, I can do that. A lot of people have mentioned Tomassi's other books. I kind of don't want to do that because I want to explore other ideas that other people have. And then after doing that, I can probably circle back to Tomassi, but I don't want to just make videos parroting what he's said or written. Like at that point, I think you guys should just go and read his books. But I do have some ideas written down here that I like to make as suggestions for potential videos in the future. And just kind of have a poll. So if you guys want to vote for any particular idea or subject that you want to see me discuss, or if you want to bring in your own idea for something that I should talk about, I want to kind of get you guys' ideas on what you want to see and where you want me to see this, or where you want to see me taking this channel in the future. And all of this is interesting to me. So any one of these things that you pick, I'd be willing to go with. I'm definitely open to suggestions. So if you have a book that a bunch of you think that I should be reading or reviewing or talking about, or any subject matter I should be talking about, I would definitely be open to discussing that. There are obviously going to be some things that a lot of you guys might want me to talk about that I'm going to look at it and say, I have nothing substantial or worthwhile to say on this, but that's something we'll see where it goes. As for the poll, I'm going to read the different subjects that I've got here that I think would be interesting to talk about. If none of these are interesting, tell me none of the above and give me an alternative. But I thought it'd be kind of fun to try this. So, number 1, where did we go wrong? I'm going to have these written in the description for this video, so you guys can look at them and tell me what you think. But number 1, where did we go wrong? I want to do a review of The Feminine Mystique by Betty Friedan. And with that, I also want to read a book called Betty Friedan and the Making of the Feminine Mystique by a man named Daniel Horowitz, which gives a lot of historical context to the book, when Betty Friedan wrote the book, who Betty Friedan was. It just kind of gives it... I think a historical context for a book like that would be important. So I'm going to do a review of both of those together. It's probably not going to be a chapter by chapter review like I did with Tomassi's book, but Tomassi was, in this book, he's been introducing concepts that I think a lot of men have not necessarily been exposed to. And so I wanted to do a chapter by chapter reaction to that. This book, we'll see where it goes, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a lot of reading material, so there's going to be a lot of different ideas that I want to discuss, and I kind of want to discuss that because, that 1950s housewife kind of started to, it saw its end with the rise of the feminine mystique, and the beginning of this, second wave feminism, basically. Feminine mystique, of course, was one of the catalytic elements in the beginnings of second wave feminism, and a lot of people these days, there's the traditional housewife, the trad wife movement that's starting up, and there's a lot of people who feel nostalgia for those times and who want to go back to those times and who look at those times and say, that was when we were doing well, that was when America had it right. And so I want to go back and I want to explore the feminine mystique. I want to explore some criticism of the feminine mystique as provided by Daniel Horowitz, and I want to kind of, talk about that, years and years, decades into the future from when this book was written. Was this really the path we should have gone down? And obviously, I think being somebody who's kind of reverted back to the traditional housewife kind of movement myself, it's like, well, maybe, I'm sure there are some things in the Feminine Mystique that would be interesting to talk about. I think there are some things she got right from what I've seen of it, but there are probably many things she got wrong. So the other one, I've already talked a little bit about how, in the comments, about how I want to review this one, The Mystery Method, How to Get Beautiful Women into Bed by Mystery and Chris Odom. Odom. I can't pronounce his name. I'm not going to try. One of the reasons I want to do this is because I didn't have any idea that mystery even existed until I read Tomassi's book. And I'm very curious. I want to see what he has to say. I want to read about this because I have the feeling that, at least some of the things he talks about are things that I've, experienced, especially in strip clubs with so many men hitting on me. I kind of do want to talk about, how women react to some of these things, what we're actually thinking when guys do some of these things. I've slept with multiple pickup artists in my life who were, self-admitted pickup artists. And, personally, I've enjoyed their company. There are some things that I think were kind of pitfalls of pickup artistry. There's a tendency for a lot of pickup artists to not necessarily do so well when it comes to long-term, healthy, monogamous relationships. Mystery himself, I think, ended up divorced. But I think it'd be an interesting book to read, and I would definitely be happy to take the time, sit down, read it, and make a bunch of videos about it. So that's another one I figured would be fun to suggest. And then also, lastly, but maybe not least, who the heck is June Cleaver? I want to do like a big long character study. I want to watch a bunch of Leave It to Beaver. I'm not going to be including clips of Leave It to Beaver, but I do want to do like a big in-depth character study of June Cleaver and also people's reaction to June Cleaver. I grew up hearing June Cleaver as a very negative term, like, oh, well, you don't want to be June Cleaver. And so I always had this idea that she was like this mindless little housewife, Stepford automaton who, didn't think for herself, didn't know, how to do anything without her man. And, just was a very flat, kind of one sided character. And at some point, because I wanted to do some video at some point in the future about June Cleaver, I watched like the beginning of an episode of Leave It to Beaver, and I was incredibly impressed by how three-dimensional of a character she was, and how fleshed out she seemed, and how real her relationship with her children and her husband seemed, and how, obviously it was somewhat idealized. I mean, it was, Leave It to Beaver was a very idealized picture of a suburban family, but there's this very negative association that I had always been given by society when it came to June Cleaver. And when I looked at her character, it was like, I saw in one scene she was like, kind of flirting with Ward, I think is his name, her husband, and it reminded me very much of the way that I flirt with my husband. I was like, yeah, that's a marriage. That's how it works. That seems, yeah, that's real. I was very impressed by this. So I would love to do kind of an in-depth character study of June Cleaver and the way our society has reacted to June Cleaver. And also, I think a lot of people in our society are slowly, or at least a lot of bloggers that I've seen, when I did a Google search on June Cleaver, there were a lot of women who were talking about the positive aspects of June Cleaver, which is not necessarily what I was expecting. I was expecting a lot of women complaining about her or tearing her down, like, this isn't real. And I saw some of that. I saw some people going, she was just a character. She's not real. Women aren't like that. And that's what I've always been, fed. There are a lot of people out there, too, who are like, June Cleaver was an idealized image of what a housewife is, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we should throw the baby out with the bathwater there. She was an excellent picture of a happy housewife, a satisfied housewife, and what does that actually mean? So I'd love to talk about that one too. So there's three things that I would love to discuss with you guys. I'd love to talk about with you guys. I'd love to make videos about. you might not be particularly interested in the feminine mystique. That might be like a really boring sounding. I don't think it would be boring, but it might be a very boring sounding subject for you. I don't want to make I don't want to make videos that are going to bore you guys. I want to get, I want to put stuff up here that I find interesting and that you find interesting because that's fun. So, if any of these three options really sounds interesting to you, you can leave a comment on Minds, BitChute. You can leave a comment on YouTube, and I don't think it will get deleted. Let me know what you want to hear from me. And, well, what you want me to hear me talking about. You're not going to get my opinions. You're not going to be able to tell me what my opinions should be, but tell me what you want to hear, what you want to discuss with me, and I'll start making videos along those lines. If none of the above appeals to you, give me some other suggestions, and I'll look into them and see if any of those really sings to me. And if it does, I will make videos about those things too. You know, I want to do something that is mutually entertaining and interesting. So from here, probably until the end of the Irrational Mail, I'm just going to be kind of checking my comments and seeing what people have to say about these, because YouTube lasts indefinitely, and so does BitChute, and so does Minds, really. I'll probably be getting comments long after I've finished my review of the Rational Mail on what you guys want to hear about, and I'll keep that in mind. I'll consider that. It doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to just drop everything and do a video about something because one of you suggested it. I might have to put it on hold because I've already lined up several other projects. I might never be able to do a video about something you guys have suggested because it might be something that I look at and say, I cannot really talk about this in any way that's interesting or particularly meaningful. Sometimes I hit a wall with something where it's like, I suppose I could talk about it, but I don't find it particularly interesting, and making a video about it would be like pulling teeth. That doesn't happen often, but it does happen, and so I reserve the right to look at it and say, I just don't think I could make anything good for you about this particular subject. But other than that, I've had a few guys give me some suggestions, and I will definitely be considering those and listening to those. So feel free to answer the poll on Minds, BitChute, or YouTube, or all of the above. You can vote 3 times if you want to. I'm not going to be checking to see if you're the same person. Let me know what you want to hear. And with that, I think I will talk to you guys later.